Welcome to the Mom as Well podcast, where we are digging deep into the gifts and the gaps of foster and adoptive parenting. I'm Tara Hutton, and I'm glad you're here. Mama's Well. Yes, she is. Hey, if you are new to the podcast, this is a place where, where mamas and daddies, I hope, are learning about themselves and about just how we can be there in a way, be with our children as they are struggling through their own trauma, their own chaotic backgrounds, their fears. And I'm learning, and hopefully if you're listening, you're on the same journey, but that it is so much more about me than them. And the better equipped I am at taking good care of myself, I can create an atmosphere for healing. And so that's what we're about. And so if you're interested in that, then you're in the right place. And today I have a special guest that I think we're going to be able to talk about a lot of that. The way that foster care and adoption has changed us from a deep level, from the inside out, and how we see the world. And my guest today is Jason Johnson. He is an author, a speaker, and a blogger. And you can find him at jasonjohnsonblog.com. And you know what? If you've been around this world for a while, you've probably heard him or read something that he's written. And so I am thrilled that he's sitting right next to me today.
Yeah.
Hi, Jason.
Good to be here in our yellow chairs.
Yeah, aren't they cool?
I like them.
They're sunshine yellow.
Yes.
And my daughter's middle name is Sunshine.
Oh, cool.
So they're Trinity chairs. She likes to say. One day they're going to join me on the podcast. They have pretended. We have 2 little girls and 3 boys. They have pretended to do podcasts often at home.
That's funny.
It's really cute.
My youngest pretends to make YouTube videos.
Oh,
Welcome back to my channel, which she doesn't have, of course. Don't forget to subscribe below, which of course they can't.
Yeah,
but
no,
that's her
totally.
thing. Yep.
Yeah, is this the world? We didn't have cell phones when I got married. I mean, and now they have. It's just different.
It is.
I'm dating myself.
It's different. Yes.
So, Jason, we've never really had an in-depth conversation until just a few minutes ago. And I am really excited to continue that. I've seen you speak. I've read your books. I've read your blogs, and I'm always inspired. I've shared your books. I got one right here.
Awesome.
One of them.
There it is.
So, will you update us on your family? Because I'd love to know that. I think that would be great.
Yeah, the very short version is in 2012, we became licensed foster parents in Houston. And our first placement came that same year, and she ended up never leaving, which has been a great thing, but also it's a hard thing because the fact that she could never go home is a tragedy. The fact that she could become a part of our family is beautiful. And so it's this mixed bag, as you know, of beauty and brokenness, but she's never left. She's become our daughter. She is now 9. So it's crazy that was 9 years ago. And since then, since 2012, we had other little girls come and go. We're an all-girl house.
Okay.
If you bring a boy to our doorstep, he would turn and run. Like, get me away from here. Why are you bringing me here? So girls only. And then that evolved into opening our home to a young mom in our community who had just given birth to some twin girls, and they needed a place to stay, which then evolved into fostering a teenager who had just given birth to a little boy. And that teenager is now 21. She has lived with us on and off. She's got a couple of more kids in tow. She's currently not living with us, and she's not without her struggles by any means, but our commitment to her has been, you are stuck with us forever, no matter what. And she has done her best to make us prove that, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I do.
And we have done our best to stick by that. And so she's 21. She's got a few little kiddos. They call us JJ and Emmy. That's our grandparent names. She calls us mom and dad, and we're just doing the best we can with her at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Doing the best you can. That's a very compassionate thought.
To your point, yes.
Yeah.
Like I'm talking more to myself there, like, hey, you're doing
Yeah.
the best you can.
I heard
right?
that.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, it is challenging to raise teenagers and young adults and launch them. Two of mine got married this year, and great kids, still hard to do,
Yeah.
because they are their own people.
Yeah, and then when you're working with a 17-year-old girl who is also now a mom, and you quickly realize this is a baby raising a baby in a lot of ways. And I don't mean that derogatory.
No.
I just mean the life that she has been dealt is one in which she now finds she, at the time that we met her, found herself at 17 years old, completely incapable of, frankly, managing herself. And now here's this little boy that she's responsible for. And that's overwhelming. And you immediately are kind of overwhelmed with empathy and compassion, understanding the life that this girl has been handed is wildly unfair. And the odds have always been against her. And we're grateful to be meeting her now. But gosh, like, it starts to make you look inside and say, yeah, but like, where were we in that story years before any of this even had to play out this way, right? Like, where were we 17 years ago when she was born? Obviously, we didn't know her story. We didn't know where she was born. But you look back and you go, what kind of life, knowing what we know now, you look back and go, gosh, what kind of life were we living where we were just completely unaware that any of this was even happening?
Right.
And yet now here we are, and let's do the best that we can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That being unaware, I think awareness is like a huge word for me. And I probably say it a billion times on this podcast because I'm always talking about this awareness that I'm coming into.
Yeah.
I mean, you've said something earlier, and I think, again, I've said this all the time. You can't unsee something.
Right.
You can't unexperience something. I remember thinking the kinds of things I was thinking back then is like, oh gosh, I don't want my kids to see pornography because you can't unsee that.
Right.
Well, I'm having these moments like all the time where I'm seeing things that you can't help but be shifted. Right.
Yeah. And once you see it, you can't ever see anything else the same. And that the issue of awareness, and a lot of the work I get to do, particularly in the church world, and just, the raising of awareness, that's on one hand, that's substantial. But on the other hand, I often think, I'm aware of a lot of things that I'm not involved with. I'm aware that there's issues over here or over there or over there. So for me, it's as we raise awareness, what's that tipping point that causes someone to move from awareness to, I'm actually going to get involved with that. Over and over, I have found, and we have found this in our own story, that tipping point is often when people have the opportunity to see themselves in someone else's story.
Yeah.
It's empathy. It's when you meet the 17-year-old who were her 100th placement or whatever, and she doesn't want to be there, and we don't even want her to have to be there. Like, none of this should be happening, right? And you look at her, and then I look at my own daughters, and I think I would give my life to protect my daughters from many of the things that this girl has had to fight on her own. And that's not right. And how come someone wasn't there for her, like I would be for my own daughters? And then it's as if, God is up there kind of orchestrating and going, oh, do I need to spell it out for you, Jason? How come someone like you isn't there? And then on that personal, I can see myself in this story. I can see her in our story. I can see us in them. And you go, really the only difference between me and her is that when she struggled And when she fell real far. There was no emergency fund. There was no, the car breaks down and I can just pay a few $100 to fix it. No, it's kind of this trickle effect of so many people live in these precarious positions where single mom working hard, doing the best she can, 2 jobs, unreliable car breaks down, can't get to work, gets fired, can't pay her rent, gets evicted, is now homeless with kids. Child Protective Services shows up, now foster care is in the story, and you go, wow, so much of that is avoidable, solvable, and completely unacceptable. And you go, on what level are we all just kind of in this thing called life together? And we're all doing the best that we can. We're all worthy of grace. We're all wired for struggle. And we're in this thing together. Like, there is no us and them.
Just about to, I was just about to think that.
It's just us.
We're all connected.
Yeah, it's just us together. Like, if you're doing well, I'm doing well. And if you're not doing well, then I should be able to kind of see myself in your struggle and go, yeah, that's a human struggle. And I'm a human, and I can see myself in that. And that compels me to move from, well, I'm just aware of your struggle, to, no, I want to engage in your struggle. And I want your struggle to be my struggle, because it's us together.
I think what term I have been using, and this is, I'm not trying to get psychobabble-ish at all, but it's self-awareness. And I think for much of my life, anything that I saw outside of myself that was painful, in an effort, whatever experience I see, someone dying of cancer, someone, whatever is going on, in a self-preservation, I just needed to shut those places down. I can't feel that. That's too painful. And what foster care has forced me, kicking, screaming, I've described it as if my skin I'm being skinned alive at times, to see is I too have this pain that they have. And I think you mentioned the word empathy. I think empathy comes from really being with another, not seeing it. But being with another, experiencing that pain, and knowing that you have that capacity to feel the depth that they feel.
Yeah, this is a real human, and it's not from a distance. It's the most distant place is apathy. I just don't care, right? And then there's, pity. Well, I feel bad for you. And then there's kind of sympathy, like, is there anything I can do for you? And then there's empathy, which says, I'm actually going to enter into this with you. Because there is no us and them. It's just us together. And recognizing that none of us are too far removed from our worlds completely crumbling. All it takes is one simple thing, or a trigger that starts to kind of unspiral this whole sense of comfort or convenience that we work so hard to try to build up around ourselves, to isolate and insulate. And when we understand and recognize that is so precarious, like the energy that we put into trying to maintain that insulated bubble, like at any moment could just explode. And I think deep down, we know that.
That's why we fight so hard.
And we fight so hard, and we live in fear. Like, we live in fear of is today the day that it all crumbles? Well, what do I need to do today then to kind of keep building these barricades? And a lady who I deeply respect, I was listening to her podcast not long ago, and she was talking about how all of us wear armor. And we learned at an early age what armor we need to wear and why. And part of her working with adults is helping them identify, hey, what armor do you wear and why? Like, at what point did you begin to understand, I need to wear armor, meaning I need to protect, and and what is that armor and why, and how can we begin to dismantle that so that we can live more vulnerably and authentically.
I like it. And that's what I want to talk about today.
I'm
gonna make you get really vulnerable.
All right. Let's start taking the armor off.
I read your book
Yeah.
a few years ago, and it was very, it was Reframing Foster Care. I got it right here. If you haven't read it, highly recommend it. As I'm thinking, like, I love the word reframing.
Mm-hmm.
I've also used the word reframing. There's another word that I like, deconstructing.
Mm-hmm.
And but let's use reframing today. Foster care. You say reframing foster care, and this may be exactly what you're trying to say. But what I'm feeling is that foster care is reframed me. Mm-hmm. Deconstructed, rebuilt, whatever, reframed, mm-hmm. and I have a different lens that I see the world.
Right.
I have a different lens that I see my adult children, my girls that came to us through foster care and adoption, their biological family, my husband, mm-hmm. and my God, mm-hmm. and the way he sees me. And so I wanted to talk about that today.
Yeah.
I want to talk about in those kind of big chunks of categories. How I know. Can I read a snippet from your book?
Sure, why not?
It's a short snippet.
You've got a lot of great bookmarks in there.
I know, it's a short snippet.
This is it's encouraging to see it so worn.
Well, yeah, I usually... I listen. I've become, this was probably earlier in my journey. I'm now an Audible fan.
Okay.
I can listen to a book really quickly on Audible 1.5. And then I usually, if it's a really good one, I buy two.
I love the real books. I'm the odd guy on the plane that's pulling a real book out of his bag.
I don't get plane rides, Jason.
Oh, okay.
I get laundry rooms.
Yeah.
Okay, I get dishwashing where I can have one headphone on and one headphone off. But if it's a really good one, I have two copies. I have the paper copy and the Audible. Yours, I didn't listen to an Audible. It was a real read.
Yes.
So, just talking about how you can't unsee something. Yes. I love this clip. This is on page 205. I'll never forget the first time we sat across from the table from the biological mother of the little girl who we would eventually become our daughter. A few months had passed since the fragile newborn to whom this mother had given birth had been brought into our home by Child Protective Services. A period of time during which I had vilified, is that how you say that? Vilified and demonized her in my heart for what she had done to such a precious, innocent child. We now sat across the table from the very woman that I had convinced myself was nothing but evil. While one part of my heart longed to hate her, I was surprised to find another part of me wanting to hug her. Through deep sobs, she shared her story of childhood abuse, chronic addiction, and long-term demons in her life that she couldn't seem to shake. For the first time, I realized something profoundly simple. She wasn't a demon at all, but a human, a broken one, like me. Nor was she my enemy. She was actually somehow, in some way, my responsibility. Her brokenness broke me, forcing me to put down the weapon held ready in my heart and instead to take a good long look into the mirror of my soul. And that's what I want to talk about today.
Man, that is good.
That's really good. That's really good. And it's been my experience.
Yeah. The title of the book, the word reframing, I'll never forget. We were standing outside of a grocery store in the town where we live at these, they still have them, these red box video rental places that literally nobody uses anymore. And we were standing behind a mom and a couple of girls, and over kind of on the opposite side of the entrance was another little girl who was really having a hard time, like really struggling. And I quickly put two and two together and realized that little girl over there struggling belonged to this mom. And as the mom's looking at videos, she's also yelling at this little girl over there to shut up and get your act together and this or that. And I'm sitting there thinking, that doesn't seem to be working, right?
Were you alone at the store or with your 3 children?
No, I was with one of my daughters, if I recall. And
because you could actually think.
Yeah, my daughter could probably sense, Dad's about to say something, right? This is either going to go really well or not good. We're going to be on the news tonight. And I kind of slid over so the mom could see that I was seeing what was happening. And she looked at me and she said, "What do you want?" I said, I just want you to know that I'm here. And she began to angrily tell me, well, you don't understand. This little girl suffers from, she was born with fetal alcohol syndrome, and this and that and this and that. I said, well, oddly enough, I do understand. This was relatively early on into our foster care journey, and we had kind of the veil of trauma and generational cycles of issues, and just all kind of explode in our face. And I said, actually, I wanted to say, unfortunately for you, you've kind of messed with the wrong guy now, right? Like, I'm super raw in this, and you tell me you don't understand. This girl was born with fetal alcohol syndrome, and I say, actually, I do understand. And what I understand is that the way you're handling this right now is completely unacceptable, and completely inappropriate, and way off. Now, had we not stepped into this foster care journey, and had the veil pulled back, and we see things we can never unsee, I don't know that I would have seen that situation the way that I saw it, right? Once you see things, you can never unsee them, and it changes the way you see everything else, right? And so I realized in that moment, the only reason that I'm seeing the scenario the way I'm seeing it is because I've seen things, and I've become aware of things that, had I otherwise not, I would have framed this situation completely differently. I would have thought, yeah, there's a disobedient little girl over there that's not obeying her mom, and an angry mom that's stressed out and strung out and whatever. And yeah, I get it. But I had the opportunity to see it through a different lens. No, this is a little girl over here who's struggling deeply. And there's more going on in her brain and in her body, and it's expressing itself in behaviors. But what she needs right now is not someone to try to manage or control her behavior. What she needs right now is for mom to get her face out of the red box machine, go over there, and kind of enter into it with her.
Right.
And I'm not trying to be derogatory towards mom. The point was, I walked away from that realizing, this was very early on in our foster care journey. I walked away from that experience realizing, oh no, I'm never going to be able to see anything the same anymore.
Nope.
I'm never going to be able to hear a story the same of someone struggling. I'm never going to walk by, I know this sounds cliche, but I'm never going to walk by the homeless person on the street the same without thinking, there's a story there.
Right.
There's a deeper story there that has led this person to where they are. And then that goes even further. It began to drive questions in us, my wife and I, and even as I was leading our church at the time when we started our journey with, well, what are the implications then for us? As if we become aware that there are deeper stories here that started years, if not generations before. So to that statement, not only do I see through sobs the story of this young biological mom, but her story is, this is how my mom grew up, so it's how I grew up, and now my worst fears are coming true because it's now kind of perpetuating itself into the lives of my own kids. And you go, man, not only do I have a responsibility to be here now for this little girl and this mom, but on what level do I have a responsibility to look back upstream and say, how can we begin to step into these stories long before they ever lead to tables like this?
Right.
And then you go, gosh, man. It can be overwhelming, but it can also be really beautiful when it's a whole new color to the world.
Oh, yeah. Would you ever trade it?
No.
Me neither.
Do I wish? Sometimes, and I say this often to people, life would be a whole lot easier if we didn't do hard things or we weren't aware that there are hard things around us. It frankly would be a lot easier. But knowing what we know now, what kind of life would that be?
Yeah.
I wouldn't trade it.
Yeah. I love Brene Brown says, lean into the discomfort.
Yeah.
And I had a saying, I think I could quote this as my saying, I don't know, nothing new under the sun. But I said one time, I remember exactly where I was in my house, and I said, hard is hard, but hard's not bad. Hard is hard, but hard's not bad. And I've made everything bad and good in my life.
Right. That's right.
It's bad or it's good.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah.
But it's not bad.
And that's a great point.
It's not good.
Yeah, and hard is not wrong,
Right.
right? Like you kind of, I don't know how or why or where. I grew up in a my dad has been in ministry, he's a pastor my whole life, and I somehow ended up growing up in the church world thinking if something was hard, then that must mean I'm doing it wrong.
I think it was a universal thing, because I did too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if something's hard, then there's something wrong with it, and you're doing it wrong, it's not working. And the older I got, and again, as we engaged in foster care and I started to read scripture differently and understand my faith differently, actually I see over and over in the Bible, literally nowhere ever does it say, follow God and everything will be easy.
Right.
As a matter of fact, quite the opposite is suggested. Hey, things are going to become increasingly hard and difficult, but there's hope in the end. And hard does not mean you're doing it wrong. And here's what we tell families often involved in foster care is we're hardwired to think if it's hard and it's not working, then I'm doing it wrong. And actually what is very true is if it's hard, it probably means you're doing it right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're just doing it.
And you're just doing it.
Because it's just hard.
You're exactly where you need to be.
Yeah.
You're doing exactly what you need to do.
Yeah.
And it's hard, but it's not wrong.
Right.
You're not messing up. You're doing the best that you can. Because like you said, hard things are hard. And life would be a whole lot easier if we just avoided all of that.
And it'd be a whole lot less deep and meaningful and
absolutely.
juicy.
I mean, I'll be honest, do we have to do kind of some logistical gymnastics in our family because we've got a little one that really struggles? Yeah, we do. And would it be a lot easier if we could just all hop in the car and go to a movie or be able to go to the mall or go on a trip without fear that everything's going to unravel? Yeah, it'd be a whole lot easier. But we look at this little girl and we say, but we wouldn't trade an ounce of that comfort or convenience for her. I mean, we wouldn't trade her for any of that, you know. And we look at friends our age who can do those things. They, you know, their kids are getting older and everything's just kind of easier, and it's, at least it seems, right?
Yeah.
They can just go out to the restaurant or go on the trip or this, and we look at that and we go, man, life would be a whole lot easier if we didn't do hard things. But
speaking of hard things, our marriage. I don't know. I haven't. I know that. I think I read this in your book. I can't remember where I read it, but I know that your wife Emily was kind of she kind of catapulted you guys into this foster care journey. So I totally get that. I probably am not the catapult on this journey in our relationship. It was probably more my husband because he was adopted, but actually we came about this decision together, which was cool. Our whole family, because we had come off of a mission trip, and I've talked about that plenty of times on this podcast. But how has this really? I mean, tell how real are you willing to get on the marriage part? Like, it's a tough one, and I'm just going to throw out some of the things that we've struggled with. But Kyle and I were not raised, and honestly, no one of my generation. I'm about to turn 50 next month. I mean, like we didn't. There was no trauma sensitive parenting.
Yeah.
There wasn't even really very good parenting. I mean, there was just very rigid. I am authoritative over you. I remember when my boys were little, I read a book called Respectful Parents, Respectful Children. Or I can't remember, but it was not be respectful to the parent. It was about learning respect like I respect them and listening, being there, you know, those kinds of things, which was huge for me.
Right.
Because in my growing up, it was like, I'm the parent, you're the child.
Right.
I speak, you listen. And that's that. And that's very much how my husband was raised. It's very much how I was raised. So I know this is talking about parenting, but in a sense, it's really talking about marriage because he and I are great when we're on a date, when we're on vacation. We have all
Sure.
this alone time. We know how to talk. We know how to connect. We are in it, right? You throw kids into the mix, and it's like, whew.
Right.
And now you're going to throw kids who have different parents and trauma and all this kind of stuff, and it gets loud. And so, how has this impacted your marriage? And go for there.
I'll start with, yes, she catapulted us into this. It was, the idea of adoption was always on the radar for both of us. The idea of foster care was not, until we became aware of it, and we realized, now that we know it exists, we can never unknow it. So what does that mean for our family? She was ready faster than I was. And here's what I tell people, is there's a lot of pressure in marriages, I think, at times, to not do anything until you're, quote, on the same page. And that sounds good, but practically, like on a Wednesday, it doesn't always, you can't, when the decision needs to be made on a Wednesday, normal, just real life, raw, and we go, well, we can't do anything until we're on the same page. We go, that doesn't work, right? So for us, it was, it's not that we weren't on the same page, but we were at least reading the same book. She was just on page 200, and I was still like thumbing through the table of contents, right? So she's reading, so it's not that we disagreed on this is something that is good and our family should pursue. It was more, she's just a little further ahead than I am. So I often tell couples, look, if you wait till you're on the same page with everything, it'll paralyze you and you won't ever do anything, right? At least kind of establish like the boundaries of what is the book that we're reading together? What are our values? What do we believe is right and good and true? What do we want our family to become? What do we want our marriage to be all about? And if that can drive you, then sometimes that's what's going to help you move forward, even if you're not on the same page necessarily, right? So that meant she needed to start reading a little bit slower. I needed to kind of man up and start reading a little bit faster, quit using the excuses that I was using at the time. And then eventually we would meet right where we need to meet. And and we would realize, okay, I think now we're at a point where we can move forward in unity. But that also plays out in practical life. That plays out for us when we don't agree on a parenting decision, on how to handle a certain particular issue with one of our kids. Is we may not be on the same page, but are we at least being driven like by the same, quote, book, right? Like by the same values and objectives, and are we willing to trust each other, right? So my big thing was I grew up in a tradition that basically said, as a husband, your job, your role is to lead your wife, spiritually lead your wife, and just be the leader of your household. And I go, okay, yeah, great. I'm all in for that. And then in my head, I'm thinking, I literally have no idea what that means. Like, what does that mean? Yeah. So I grew up kind of thinking, well, I guess that means like every morning at 5 a.m., we should get up before our kids and do a Bible study together and pray for an hour. And, we should have no TV in our room because that's a sanctuary and blah, blah. And then I got married and I realized like the absolute worst thing I could do for my wife is wake her up at 5 a.m. to do a Bible study and take the TV out of our room, right? She's like, no, if you want to spiritually lead me, don't wake me up at 5 a.m. and you better leave the TV in our room. And I go, well, that just breaks all my categories of how I thought I was supposed to lead. And here's what I learned through our journey, especially as we walked through, especially as we engaged in the foster care journey. And then even now, how it trickles out into daily life is sometimes leading my wife, whatever that means being willing to follow her. We may not be on the same page, but we're reading the same book. She's a little further ahead than I am. What is it in me that is preventing me? What fears, what concerns, what anxieties, what past wounds are holding me back and preventing me from trusting who she is and what's in her heart and being willing to follow her? And the older I've gotten, the more I've learned some of the leaders I respect the most are the ones that you never even know they're in the room. Mm-hmm. They create an environment in which other people flourish and thrive, and then they're totally okay with getting out of the way. And again, that breaks all the categories of what I thought it would mean to lead my family. You always need to be out front. You always need to have the right answer. You always need to be driving things forward. And I go, actually, I love it when a leader's willing to stand up in front of people and say, I don't know, but we're going to figure it out together.
Yeah.
And the way that we're going to move forward is by me. I trust you. I trust the people that we have in this room, and you're the experts here, and let's move forward, and we're going to learn together. And so that means in the big things of deciding when we're going to start fostering, but also in the daily, how are we going to handle this parenting situation
right.
or this discipline situation? We may not be on the same page with it, but we have learned to trust each other.
Yeah.
And hey, that might not be how I would handle it, but I trust that you may handle it differently, but it's still going to be within the scope of what, like kind of how we're operating and what our goals are.
Yeah.
And how that plays out practically in parenting is we've had our older girls, our biological girls, say to us often, they've offered up their parenting advice to us on how we handle our youngest, who comes from a very different place and has very unique struggles. And they've said, that's not fair. How come, if we did that, you would do this, but when she does that, you do this. Say, well, and so we've sat down with them, the older they've gotten, and tried to explain to them, that, her brain is not like your brain. Mm-hmm. Her brain was hurt when she was little, and her brain is healing, and all of these different dynamics, but also just understanding every kid needs to be parented differently. Like there's no prescription,
right?
Especially when we're talking about kids from hard places.
Right.
And one of my favorite thoughts on this comes from a friend of mine who wrote a great book, and she's one of these families like yours that has like the older set of kids and then the younger set of kids, right? Mm-hmm. And she said that with her first set of kids, she found herself parenting towards behavior and performance. And with her second set of kids, all who came from foster care, adoption, hard places, it wasn't parenting towards performance and behavior, it was parenting towards connection and healing. Mm-hmm. And that was really important for me to hear a while back, is that left to my own devices, and my wife too, who grew up in a very kind of sheltered, Christian, very conservative environment, like spaghetti straps are evil, and that kind of
ponchos,
that kind of thing, and just breaking out of some of that legalism and some of that narrow mindset, and realizing, are some of the battles worth fighting with our kids if they ultimately destroy connection, right? Now, obviously there's a line there. It's not like, yeah, sure, go,
right.
do whatever you want as long as, you like me and we're connected. But I think it helps to filter through for us. If the book that we're reading on parenting now is connection and healthy souls in our kids and the ability to see the world differently, the ability to make decisions that might go counter to the narrative of the world, which is telling them to go a certain way and do a certain thing. That's our goal. And so are we going to fight about, there's one too many holes in your jeans, No, probably not. Mm-hmm. And are we going to get shamed by other parents around us at times? Probably.
Yes.
Yes, we are. I mean, we just had we had a friend of ours. She called my wife, Emily, and said, hey, do you ever get like mom shamed and this and that? And she's like, yeah. And they talked through it because there was a particular issue. Then we go, even years ago, that would have bothered. Oh gosh.
Yeah. Yeah.
The perception of how other people are perceiving us, and are we living up to what their standards of who we are should be, and there's just a lot more freedom from that.
I love that. It sounds like Emily might have pulled the trigger, right? But it sounds like she kind of knew you well enough to know and knew that you were reading the same book. It
Yeah.
sounds like, you know, because
For sure.
yeah, I mean, that's probably I mean, there's so many things, you know. Kyle will look at me sometimes, he's like, he getting in touch with his emotions, and I mean, I can drop into my emotions like in a heartbeat, you know. I can tell you exactly how I'm feeling. He'll look at me and say, now tell me how I'm supposed to feel right now. Tell me what you're feeling, you know. And it's like he's in a way, I lead him in that area.
Sure.
And then there's areas, you know, when it comes to fear or living in abundance versus scarcity, you know, he's leading the charge for us in this way. I would have never started this podcast had my husband not been saying, you're doing it. Sit yourself in that chair. You can do this. You know what I mean? And so there's just these give and take in ways that is so, that we find so beautiful.
Yeah, yeah. And to be able to break paradigms and break out of kind of limited, and that, again, going back to reframing, is how have certain situations and emotions and experiences and expectations, how have I framed those throughout my life? Why did I frame them that way? Like, what's the source of that?
Yeah.
And are there ways in which they need to be reframed in more healthy ways? And the idea of being able to trust each other as husband and wife, like, hey, in this moment, I have to just trust you.
Yeah.
That you'll handle that parenting situation well, or that the financial decision that you're making, you know, I trust you with that. And obviously there's parameters to a lot of these things, but for me, it comes down to just mutual trust and understanding my wife has real feelings and real emotions and real fears, and there's a source to all of that from the way that she grew up, and I do too. And I would say over the last few years, I'm not the most open or in touch with my emotions person, and she'll be very quick to affirm that. But even recently, frankly, there's been stories that I realized that I'm telling her about when I was a kid, or things that I would think, or the way that I would spend my time, or fears that I had, that we've been almost 20 years of marriage, and I realize that's crazy. I've never told her about that.
Yeah.
You know, so there's something to when you start to learn to trust each other. Hey, we're reading the same book.
Yeah.
You know, and there's going to be times when we're not on the same page. That's okay. It doesn't mean something's wrong with us.
That's right.
It just means this is real life, and now is a chance for us to trust each other and to be able to say to each other, hey, I'm going to need you to step out front on this one. Okay, no, got it. And I'm going to need you to step out front on this one. And there are times, especially in the heat of the moment parenting issues, you know, and the experts say, if you can't regulate yourself, you can't help a child regulate, you know. And there's times when we have to step back and say, I'm not going to be able to regulate myself in this situation. I need you to take it. Or we come to each other and say, you're not regulating yourself very well. You need to back off.
Yeah.
I'll take it from here. Go outside, take a walk, or whatever. And that's good. Like, that's not an indictment on your marriage or on each other. That's that's helpful.
Yeah.
That's not saying, hey, you're horrible, you're doing it wrong, go outside and take a walk.
Especially when it comes from a place of, instead of you're doing it wrong, to how can I help?
Yeah.
How can I help is a game changer.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And how can I help right now?
Yeah.
You need to go regulate yourself.
Yeah. Let me take over.
And let me take over.
Yeah.
And there's times when we've said, hey.
For me, Jason, it's don't even tell me how dysregulated I am. Just say I'm taking over.
I'm taking over. Yeah,
That helps.
And there's times when maybe one of us is carrying the burden for a particular situation, you know, for too long. And we just say, look, I've been having to deal with this thing more than you have. And that's just true. And I'm going to need you to take it over now. Because I'm done. I'm tapped out. I'm empty. And if I have to handle it anymore, it's not going to go well. And that's the place that we've become. And so I say this. I don't know if I think maybe we would have eventually gotten there. I don't know that we would have gotten to some of these real places the way that we have and the time that we have, had it not been for us opening our home to this world of foster care and all of that. I think it expedites a lot of things. I tell people about, you know, our kids is opening our home to foster care, I think, has given our kids a gift that we as mom and dad would have never been able to give them on our own.
Right.
A gift of perspective. They grew up in a world now. When we started fostering, our girls were 6, 4, and 2. So it's pretty much all they've ever known. Their normal is there are really hard situations out there, and real people who are struggling through very, very real things. And frankly, they sit in classrooms and church classrooms and school classrooms and surrounded by kids their age who just haven't seen a lot of the things that they've seen,
Right.
and experienced a lot of the things that they've experienced. And I'm not saying my kid's better than them, but I am saying I think our kids, for our family, are better for it, for themselves.
Sure. Yeah.
Not better in the sense of comparing to another kid, but for themselves. They're growing up with a much broader view of the world, a much more nuanced perspective, a reframed way that they see things.
Yeah. You kind of we melded our spousal relationships in with our children, and I honestly, it's hard to see them separate. It's like it's all a part of who we are as a family.
And I like that simple, it's just who we are as a family. It's just what we do.
Yeah.
It's a new normal. It's a reframed normal.
Yeah.
That what we can never unsee what we've seen, unknow what we now know, unfeel what we felt. We live in a new normal.
Yeah.
And it's a normal that a lot of other people aren't going to really be able to relate to.
Yeah. You have to suffer. I mean, suffering is talked a lot about in the Bible. And for me, so much of my early childhood suffering, I was completely shut down to. Like I had just, in order to survive, and it wasn't a life or death survival, but it was a relationship survival. If I want to stay in good graces, we do not talk about certain things or act certain ways or anything. So, but then I've also suffered the death of my mom to cancer in 4 months, the suicide of my dad, an alcoholic father that I regularly get letters from that I have no idea how to navigate, and then foster care and adoption and seeing the suffering there, experiencing it in my home, and all of these things are just the meat of me, the depth of me. And I, in the middle of them, like I just spent most of my early life trying to avoid those things.
Right.
And then just nobody wants these things, and yet they're the best things of my life.
Yeah.
And it's so beautiful.
I think to that point, if there's something to being aware of the narrative that is driving you. And I think the predominant narrative in our world is something like, hey, be good, do good, make good grades, go to a good school, get a good degree so you can get a good job, marry a good guy or girl, live in a good house, have a good salary, good neighborhood, good cars, good vacations, raise good kids, have a good retirement, and just be good. And so many are kind of captive to that narrative that it creates all kinds of fears and anxieties and unhealthy souls and this desperate need to avoid and isolate from anything that's hard or difficult. And it's easy to kind of push away anything that's hard or difficult that is separate from us, right? So I can pull up to the stoplight and see the homeless guy, and there's distance, and I have no emotional connection to you, no relational. That's easy. But when those hard things like you just described are so close, the only way for us to avoid and isolate is to put up armor and to shut ourselves off to it, because the narrative that's driving me is easy and convenience and just a good, comfortable, safe life. Safe life.
Word. Yeah.
And it's imprisoning a lot of people, and they don't even know it. I didn't know it until, honestly, the night, I think we write about it in the book, the night that our first placement showed up at our door in Houston, and it was a Wednesday night at 7:30, and she's screaming in her car seat, and there's a couple caseworkers there who are like, good Lord, get this girl out of our car. She's driving us crazy. Well, she was detoxing from drugs that were in her system. Of course she's screaming. And we're sitting there doing all this thing, and it just hits me, my gosh, like our little world that we had been working hard to build has just forever been exploded. I mean, everything that we knew or thought we wanted or were trying to pursue in terms of comfort and convenience and this nice little package with a bow on it literally has just been destroyed on a Wednesday night at 7:30 because this 3-day-old little baby girl was brought to our home, and nothing is ever going to be the same again. And there's some grief involved in that.
Oh, yeah.
There's a processing where you go, I now have to grieve. I grieve the loss of the life I thought I wanted for the acceptance of the life that I now have.
Maybe that was a blog or something I just read of yours.
There's a letting go.
Yeah.
That if we're going to enter into this space authentically, and we're really going to step into the stories of other people in a way that says there is no us and them, it's just us together, then we're really going to have to process through the grief of losing this life I thought I wanted or I was told I should have, and for the one that I now do have. Yeah. And I'm going to choose, even in that struggle of this new life, and even in the hardships, I'm going to choose to believe that there is deeper meaning and joy to be found in it than that other one that I let go would have ever been able to offer me. And if I can't get myself there, then I think I'm always going to be frustrated. I'm always going to have this chip on my shoulder. I'm always going to be disillusioned and angry a little bit. Because I was forced to give up a life that I wanted for this. Yeah. And I'm angry about that. Yeah. And I think, for me, there's moments when sometimes that it does kind of rise to the surface and go, man, did we make a mistake in 2012? What would our life look like if ... we never ... And then you go, man, I can't, the new world in which we live and we're raising our daughters in, and like you said, it's just who our family is. It's the identity of our family. Did we make a mistake in 2012? 100% no. Yeah. I wouldn't trade this for anything. Is it harder? Yeah, probably. Is it far less convenient? Oh, absolutely. But is it worth it? Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. That's a great way to, I just almost hate to say anything more. After all that. I'm just rambling now. No, so. It's beautiful. It's beautiful, and of course I can't not say anything more. My husband's laughing, I'm sure. That's exactly right. And I think the first is about our circumstances outside. The first, that protection place, right? That space of protection. Let's just say let's just call it foster care. Just because this is a dot on the line, right? Before that, it's this place of protection of all exterior things. Don't move. The rug's gonna get pulled out. Stay. Don't say that. That kind of thing. And then all of a sudden, it's this deep dive inside. We're just living from that unconscious place of how we were raised, all those things that you talked about as a dad and a husband and all that. We're just living from that unconscious place, and then all of a sudden, the triggers around us are just too powerful for us to shut down. We can't, it's like you're living in this glass house and stuff is just breaking. And it's just all of a sudden I was forced into that space. And that's what foster care and adoption has done for me, along with a lot of other things, but it's one of the biggies. Yeah. Yeah. And so, hey, before we go, I want you, because you're talking about this, your role, your unveiling of seeing things differently and all that, is that kind of, you've got a dad thing going on.
I want you to share what that is. It's a dad. It's a study or.
Oh yeah.
Okay, and then so is that some of the stuff you're going to be digging in there?
Yeah, we do. It's a short kind of series for dads, foster dads, and we say foster dads meaning those who are considering it, like, hey, it's probably inevitable. Like,
Yeah, mom's.
My wife's on page 200.
catapult.
I'm in the table of contents, but I can guarantee we're going to end up there. So those who are, probably going to end up there, those who are in it now, or even those that their families have been impacted by it forever, right? Which means maybe they're not fostering anymore, maybe they have adopted, but they've got experience in it. And frankly, no part of the series, and it's for dads because
They get neglected.
it's a female heavy place.
Yeah.
Yeah, I live in a mom blog world
Yeah.
in a lot of ways, which is fine, but we wanted to create a space for dads, for men, and zero of it is like the practical how-tos of fostering. 100% of it is let's look at you and your heart and your soul and the narrative by which you're living. And because the narrative for you as a man is, this very, provide, make as much money as you can, perform. So here's what we say. Generally speaking, one of my favorite writers, a guy named Tim Keller, who's just a great thinker, says there are cultural narratives all around us. And if we're not aware and conscious to them, we fall into the stream of them and we let them drive us. And generally speaking, the cultural narrative for a woman, I've never been one and I'm not one, but generally speaking, as best as we understand, the cultural narrative is this, is your identity, your security, your value is rooted in your appearance. And we don't just mean physical appearance, although that's a part of it.
Sure.
The appearance that my
right.
family is great, my home is
All
great.
my glasses standing
I'm holding
straight.
it all together, right?
Yeah.
And of course, physical appearance. But for men, not that that's not a voice in their head, but the primary voice would probably lean more towards my identity and my value are rooted in my performance. My performance at work, my ability to build a certain lifestyle and prove to people how well I perform through the house we live in and the vacations, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And we go, okay, what does the truth of God have to say to that cultural narrative for a woman? And what does the truth of God have to say to the cultural narrative for a man? And so much of what we talk about in this Dad series is what narrative are you living by? And what does the truth of God say into that? That your value is not rooted in your performance or your ability to prove anything to anyone, but it's rooted in your willingness to kind of lay all of that down and say, my value is tied to what I believe about who God is, what he has said about who I am, even if that means I don't live in the best neighborhood and drive the best cars. I don't really care about that. I'm free from that. I'm free from that, from the pressure to live up to that. So we talk a lot about that. We talk a lot about what we've talked about here. What does this mean in your marriages? The pressure to always be out front, always have the right answer. What would it look like if you were a husband that you cultivated an environment in which you said, hey, we're not always going to be on the same page, but we are going to read the same book. And that means sometimes I'm going to come to you and say, hey, I don't really know. I'm going to be vulnerable. Say, I don't really know, but I trust you. And that kind of, we're going to build that mutual trust. What does it mean for your kiddos? Like, how do you want to raise them? Like, what are the values that are driving your parenting of them? Is it going back to, well, I find my value in my performance, and so I'm going to project that onto my kids as well. Yeah. Or am I going to help them live within a new narrative as well, right? So these are the things we talk about, because I think there's implications not only for how we, as dads, handle the foster parenting journey and the adoptive journey, but just for all of life in general.
Yeah.
You show up at the office that's driven by performance and numbers, and they see you not really build your life around those things. They go, what's
wrong?
What?
Yeah.
You're crazy. I am a little crazy. But here's what we did last night. We were or I had to leave work early yesterday because I had to get downtown for a court hearing, and we sat with biological mom, and this and that and this and that. And these other people in the office are going, what in the world?
Yeah.
And frankly, to be honest with you, I think as people step into this foster care journey, not only obviously does it impact the kiddos and the families that we're saying, hey, we're in this with you now. Like, let's start to write a new story together. It has profound impact on us. It also has profound impact on the people around us that we live life among. Because I think they look at that and they're confused by it. Why? Because you're breaking the script.
Yeah.
There's a narrative you're supposed to live by, and you're not doing that.
Right.
And we're confused.
Right.
How were you able to do that? How were you able to break free from that? I think, frankly, most people are deep down, when they see someone who has found a way to break the script and live a new narrative, they're compelled by that.
Yeah.
They're really intrigued. They go, tell me how you were able to
Right.
do that. Because we want our lives to count
Right.
for something like that as well. It might not be foster care, it might not be that, but
Yeah.
I'm afraid if I just keep living within the stream of this narrative, I'm going to get to the end of my life and look back and go, what did I do?
Yeah.
I know this sounds totally weird. I just listened to randomly saw an interview with Matt Damon. You're like, how did we get to Matt Damon? Well,
I hear
trust
ya.
me, follow me. So he and his buddy Ben Affleck with Good Will Hunting wrote it in their 20s and won a Grammy, I guess, for it,
Yeah.
right? Early on, he was like
Great
26.
movie.
Yeah.
Great movie.
And they asked him, tell me what that felt like. Like, did you just, like, you're 26, did you just go out and, and party that night and just live it up? And he said, actually, to be honest with you, I don't know if it was his wife or his girlfriend at the time, maybe it was his wife. He said, we actually went home and she went to bed early because we were tired. It was a long day. And he said, I was left alone in the darkness of my house, 26, 27 years old, with this Grammy sitting in front of me. And he said, I actually started to just weep and cry because it dawned on me that I was given the opportunity at 26 years old to be confronted with the fact that this thing does not satisfy me. And he said, that night I got a gift. And the gift was not that I won a Grammy. The gift was that I was given the opportunity at 26 years old to profoundly realize this kind of stuff will not satisfy me.
Wow.
This is not what I thought it was going to be. He said, and it haunted me that night, that what if I didn't win this until I was 60 or 70? And I spent my whole life pursuing that. Yeah. And I sit it down in front of me as a 70-year-old man, and I go,
that was it?
That's it?
Yeah.
What did I just do with my life? And I thought, man, that's it. I mean, so I think when people see others around them who have found a way to live out a new narrative, they go, yes, that's it, because I'm terrified of getting to be 70 years old and turning around and realizing, what did I do? What did I do? So this foster care journey obviously has profound impact on these kids and families, profound impact on us, and I think generationally. I think our family, your family is what it is now, and as a result, your kids are different, and they will conduct their homes and their marriages and their families different, and generationally it's just going to keep trickling on. Generationally in the lives of the kids and families that we're serving, that we understand there's generational cycles often that have led these kids into foster care and the struggles that their parents have had. What does it look like for us to step into that and say, hey, what if together we started to write a new story moving forward that the cycle stops now? Yeah. Generations can be changed. Also, though, there's people around us watching in the office, at the coffee shop, at church, wherever you are, on the sidelines of your kids' soccer team, and they're looking at you, and they make odd comments, you're wonderful, you're awesome, I can never do what you do, kind of stuff. But I think underneath that, there's this like, hey, I want my life to count for something. Like, what's the secret to breaking free from the script
Yeah.
that I'm controlled by?
Yeah.
And that I'm terrified I'm going to get to the end of and realize it wasn't worth it.
Yeah. Jason, that was perfect. And it's a great place to land this plane. But there's one more question I have for you, but we're probably gone over. And that question is, how has this journey impacted your relationship with God? Like how he sees you, how you see him, and your response to that. But I'm gonna make you wait until next week, or maybe later in the week as a bonus episode. So, would you stay with me for a few minutes?
Absolutely. Let's
All
put out a
right.
bonus episode.
Bonus episode. So, guys, thanks for joining. I hope that you were as inspired as I was today listening to Jason. Like, I feel like I know him so much better, and I am going to see about dinner with him and his wife, see if that works. So thanks for joining. Guys, like and subscribe. That helps us raise awareness. Share this with friends. And I just want to say thank you for all the kind reviews and comments and feedback. It's super encouraging to me. So keep them coming. Thanks, and we'll see you next week.
Mama's well.
Yes, she is.